Good afternoon. Hello. I'm Mary Foskett, Director of the Wake Forest University Humanities Institute and Associate Professor of Religion. If you're just joining us, thank you for being here and welcome to the Symposium on the Humanities in the 21st Century, which we are hosting in celebration of the university's establishment of the Humanities Institute. It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you this afternoon's special guest speaker and a sterling panel of Wake Forest faculty. Our special guest, Stanley Fish, the Davidson-Kahn Distinguished University Professor of Humanities and Law at Florida International University in Miami and Dean Emeritus of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the University of Illinois, Chicago, needs little introduction to those of us in the humanities. Whether it was the first time we read, "Is there a text in this class? Interpretive Communities and the Sources of Authority?" or the last time we took in his latest post on his online opinionator blog at the New York Times, chances are that most of us are familiar with Stanley Fish's erudite, occasionally pointed, and often provocative writing. A prolific writer who has authored more than 200 scholarly publications and books, Professor Fish is the author of How Milton Works, The Trouble with Principle, Professional Correctness, Literary Studies, and Political Change, There's No Such Thing as Free Speech, and It's a Good Thing Too, Save the World on Your Own Time, and most recently, in 2011, How to Write a Sentence and How to Read One. He has also contributed to many of the country's leading law journals, including the Stanford Law Review, Yale Law Journal, and Columbia Law Review. Professor Fish's writing across such diverse fields and topics is notably consistent for his careful attention to language, what it is, what it means, and what it does not mean, and the function and boundaries of the norms of discourse. Throughout his career, he's continually challenged us to consider how scholarly reading and academic conversations occur within frameworks of knowledge and expectations, and to demonstrate how those frameworks condition meaning. As a leading public intellectual on the national scene, Professor Fish writes frequently on the politics of the university and comments regularly on the humanities, education, law, and society. We are delighted that he has joined us for this important occasion. In a few moments, he will lead off our panel discussion. Are the humanities good for humanity? The aims and place of the humanities in liberal education. He'll lead with remarks drawn from his current project on academic freedom and liberal education. During Professor Fish's talk, please feel free to refer to the notes that he has kindly provided. They're included in your symposium folders. Stanley Fish is joined today by a distinguished panel of Wake Forest University faculty, each of whom will speak as respondents to Professor Fish's remarks and discussion partners taking up the main topic. Michele Gillespie is the Colley Family Associate Professor of History at Wake Forest University. Her research examines the constructions of gender, race, class, memory, and region across the long 19th century in the American South. Professor Gillespie is the author of Free Labor in an Unfree World, White Artisans in Slaveholding Georgia, and co-editor of a number of volumes, including Neither Lady Nor Slave, Working Women of the Old South, and Global Perspectives on Industrial Transformation in the American South. She is now completing a new monograph, Ambitious Pursuits, Catherine and R.J. Reynolds and the Modernizing South. Professor Gillespie teaches courses in women's and gender history, labor history, and Southern history. Simeon O. Ilesanmi is the Washington M. Wingate Professor of Religion at Wake Forest, the author of numerous essays and articles, an associate editor of the Journal of Religious Ethics, and a member of the Board of Directors for the Study of Muslim Ethics. Professor Ilesanmi conducts research in the areas of human rights in Africa, war crimes, and the role of religion in contemporary African politics. His first book, Religious Pluralism and the Nigerian State, was nominated for the Council of Graduate Schools Alt Award. He has since co-edited 2 volumes, including Religion and Power in Africa and the African Diaspora, and is in the midst of completing a new monograph, Moral, Not Metaphysical, Human Rights and the Problem of Evil in Africa. At Wake Forest, Professor Ilesanmi teaches courses in comparative religious ethics, religion and law, and religious ethics and the problem of war. He is also working with a team of Wake Forest faculty colleagues to establish a Wake Forest Center for Religion, Ethics, and Law. Herman Rapaport, Reynolds Professor of English at Wake Forest University, is a prolific and extraordinarily innovative scholar. His work addresses a wide range of media, initiates constructive theoretical dialogue among the fields of visual art, poetry, and philosophy, and extends even to the creation of new visual and performance art. His monographs alone include Heidegger and Derrida, Reflections on Time and Language, Is There Truth in Art?, The Theory Mess, later Derrida, Reading the Recent Work, and soon to be published in 2011, The Literary Toolkit, a compendium of concepts and methods, which has already been praised not only for its masterful and lucid introduction to literary theory, but its provocatively original approach to its subject. Professor Rapaport, former project director of the Artist Television Project, has also performed with Elliott Sharp at White Box in New York City in conjunction with the show In Mixing, Intermedia, and Extra-Dimensional Space. This academic year, Professor Rapaport is teaching 17th century British literature and a graduate course on Habermas and Foucault. Rebecca S. Thomas, Professor of German and Associate Dean for Faculty Development, will be moderating this afternoon's panel. Her research focuses on 20th century Germany, contemporary Austria, and Austrian writers. She's published on Franz Kafka and numerous other writers, including Katrine Rugla, whose docu-novel We Never Sleep she has translated. Professor Thomas also edited Madness and Crime in Modern Austria, a collection of essays that explores the changing history, rhetoric, politics, and representation of crime and madness in modern Austria. In the college, Professor Thomas teaches German language, literature, and culture. She's also twice served as residential faculty director at Wake Forest Flow House in Vienna, Austria. And so now I am pleased to welcome Rebecca Thomas to begin this afternoon's session.
Thank you, Mary. I would like to first thank Dean and Mary for offering me the opportunity to moderate the panel today. With respect to time here, I think I would just mention that the structure of today's panel is going to be that Professor Fish will offer his remarks for about 30 minutes, giving us his thoughts about academic freedom studies, after which time the other members of the panel will offer their remarks for about 10 minutes each. So without further ado, Professor Fish.
Let me know when I'm 20 minutes in.
In 20 minutes?
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see you all here. It's an honor to have been invited to share in the opening of this wonderful Humanities Center. Listening to conversations and presentations in the last 2 days has strengthened my conviction that we who work in the Academy are extraordinarily fortunate to be able to do so, often by a juncture of luck and opportunity rather than merit. And I would also say that people here at Wake Forest are doubly fortunate because this is obviously a nurturing atmosphere, and I congratulate you for it and am pleased to be able to share it. I will, however, say that when you were told that you could feel free to consult the notes that I have provided, that was too mild. You will consult the notes that I have provided when I direct you to do so. Now, the question, are the humanities good for society or for America, can be rephrased as the question, is academic freedom good for society and America? In fact, one could go as far as to say, although I may stop short of saying, that if academic freedom is defined, it will tell us a great deal about what the work of liberal education in general and of the humanities in particular actually is. One might even go so far as to say that academic freedom is the defining characteristic of academic and humanities work. And that's just a promissory note that I'll hope to fill in as I go about filling in a taxonomy, that is, academic freedom studies. Now, you heard from several people in the last 2 days, those of you who have been attending, that one of the things that happens in academic work is that people suddenly realize that there is a topic that hasn't been explored, or a topic that hasn't been explored sufficiently, or an angle on an explored topic that hasn't been followed through. And that's what academics love to find, because they have then at that moment found their next project. Well, that's precisely what I'm doing here. Everyone has heard the term academic freedom. Some have even invoked it, probably usually badly, in my view. All administrators believe that academic freedom is an abused notion, and that it's abused by what my wife, a retired academic, called the infantile narcissism of most faculty members in colleges and universities. But she said it, I didn't, you know, don't blame me for that. But what I've begun to notice in the last 2 or 3 years when I've been teaching a course in the law and higher education, which is a new and very quickly developing field in the world of the law, is that schools of academic freedom thought are beginning to emerge. And that, lo and behold, no one had yet noticed, what a wonderful thing, no one had yet noticed that there are schools and approaches to academic freedom. So I could be the first, which is what we always want to be, I could be the first to give you a taxonomy, necessarily rudimentary and available to challenge and revision, of what I'm calling academic freedom studies. Now, any discussion of academic freedom must begin with an attempt to understand exactly what it is. What is its scope? What is its context? What is its content? What comes under its protection? To what values is it responsive? To what values is academic freedom allied? And from what values, if any, is academic freedom derived? These are all classical questions, which involves the identification as precisely as possible of the thing that you hope to be talking about and anatomizing. It turns out that it's easier to say what academic freedom is not. And so I'll begin by saying a couple of things that academic freedom is not. Academic freedom is not a legal concept. That is, although the phrase academic freedom appears in some Supreme Court cases, the court, at the moment when academic freedom is mentioned, is simply waving an honorific flag in its direction. And then the court will always go on to decide the case before it, not on the basis of anything called academic freedom, but on the basis of perhaps public employee law, or on the basis of tax law, or on the basis of contract law, or on the basis of tort law. So that while academic freedom is a phrase that you will find in Supreme Court cases, do not be deceived. It has no status in the law. It especially has no status as a constitutional right, although many academics do believe that the academic freedom that they invoke at the drop of the slightest hat is a constitutional right. Many academics, as soon as you tell them either that they can't do something or that there's something that they have done that they shouldn't done, will cry, or I might say bleat, academic freedom, academic freedom, academic freedom. But what they're doing is simply invoking a claim that has no force. And on page 8 of the handout, you'll find Rodney Smaller, a distinguished constitutional scholar and scholar of the First Amendment, now president of a university, another one over to the dark side, who has a new book, not quite published, but I had an advanced copy of it, called The Constitution Goes to College, which is a great title. And he's speaking about academic freedom. Bottom of page 8, constitutional values have operated in an informal, value-laden sense to shape and influence the identity of American colleges and universities. But this influence does not tend, Smaller continues, does not tend, where is page 9, to exert itself through formal legal doctrines that single out colleges and universities for specialized treatment. And that raises a question to which I'm going to be returning in the next few minutes. And I'll give you both the question and the answer right off the bat. The question is,